Looking for an ultra-rugged EDC that's very tiny but doesn't use a proprietary cell? Look no further. The CyanSky M3 is here. When CyanSky asked me which light I'd like to review next, I said, send me that M3. I've been looking for a little tiny 16340 celled titanium light for a while, and they've got it. You can see here's the little tiny cell, and it's got a little charging port right there. It is on the side for the included cable. So inside the box, you got the usual fare, which is a manual, lanyard, and let's see here, a little clip, but it's a press-on clip, okay? And it's going to press right in this channel right here. And if you press it on this channel, two things. One, it's going to carry top down. You can't reverse that. So this is not going to be a ball cap carry. And secondly, you might mar the finish of this it's kind of a satin finish on this. I wouldn't say a stone washed. I wouldn't say a sandblasted. It's just kind of a satin titanium raw finish. So you're going to probably mar that if you push on and off. So probably a one-time feature. All right, to hammer home how small this light is, I've got a ubiquitous D4V2 for sizing. Let's put the ThruNite T1S next to it. There you go. And the very, very ultra small Fall Mauve EDC will stick right there. Now remember, that's a custom battery. That thing is about a half AA. It's like a 14500 lithium ion, but cut in half. It's like a 14200 or 14250. And then here is the CyanSky M3. And you can see the CyanSky M3 is larger than the Fall Mauve. And that's obviously because the battery is a larger battery. But I think a lot of people kind of push back on the fact that even though this battery is removable, it's like just not a standard battery. This is a completely standard battery you can get at any store. So considerably smaller. Let's take a look on tail standing here. That is a good kind of idea of the size of these guys. This is just a really, really, really tiny light. Love it. Let's take a look at the ergonomics of this guy. It's very, very small. It's got some little cutouts here that kind of make it sit so it doesn't want to roll too badly. Can tail stand, can head stand. There are no cutouts right here though, so if it's head standing and the light's on, you wouldn't know it. There's a little cutout here for the lanyard, but it's done in that way where you don't feel it on your finger, so that's a really nice touch. That's that, you know, remember Hank is doing that now, but he used to do it this way, and then you'd hit that little thing and it felt terrible. So I love the design. I really do. It's got a neat little kind of futuristic, quasi-space futuristic look to it. The button, if you're rolling around and it's in the dark, it's not the easiest to find, but it is not difficult. I'm going to put it right in the middle. I can tell when I get to it, but it's not like so obvious, okay? I do want to point out that the button is titanium, just like the rest of it, and the front optic is covered in glass. So, oh, there's the shine right there. There's the glass. That's a nice touch because the ThruNite, the plastic TIR is just exposed, so that's scratchable. And same thing with the Fall Mauve. It's got this kind of like grating here, and that is also just plastic and exposed. So this is definitely a cut above when it comes to the ruggedness. We're going to take a look at the UI now, but I wanted to point out that in the manual, CyanSky was good enough to include a runtime chart. That's pretty cool, especially considering the fact that I just don't do runtimes. I'm just not a fan. But the UI is pretty straightforward. Since it's meant to be in your pocket, it's got a press to hold on, press to turn off. Not a big fan normally of that, but I totally get it when it comes to a pocketable light. But I'll tell you the one thing they did do right, which kind of ticks me off about some of the other manufacturers, is it is press to hold to come on and press to hold to come off. Oops, I'll get to that in a second, what I just did. But I want to point out that some manufacturers, it's like you tap twice to get on and then press to hold to get off. I hate when they mix their metaphors. It just makes it really difficult to use. Okay, so what I just did then is the hidden mode, which is strobe, and I'll talk about that in a second. But once you press and get it on, whatever mode you're on, it looks like I'm on the low, then you just tap, and that's the highest, and then it cycles back down. So I also like that it goes low, medium, high. I like that it does that, not meaning not high, medium, low. I hate when it goes that way. So that's a cool thing. And whatever you leave it on, there is mode memory. So if I'm on turbo like I just was, now I press and hold, it'll go back to turbo. So that's kind of a cool thing, if you're using it at night around the house, you don't want to wake the loved ones, just turn it off, and when you turn it back on, mode memory will be active. Now, if you press and hold to turn off, that's fine. What I had done, just so you know, is to get into the strobe, it's not a series of taps. It's press and hold to turn on and keep pressing. Okay, and then you go into the strobe. Now, I've never seen something like that before. Usually it's like 4 taps, 5 taps, something like that. It makes a lot of sense, to be honest. Because think about it. I don't imagine using the strobe in an emergency situation, and I don't think flashlights would be that amazing to disorient people in an altercation anyways. But I just want to point out that if the adrenaline's pumping, just mash the button to get to strobe. It's kind of smart. It's a pretty cool thing. Let's get some measurements on the lumen tube. CyanSky claims that the light is 700 lumens. I'm sure that's factory lumens, not out the front, after you take the optic and the glass to heart. But this little chart on the back here, you can see that there's 4 modes, and the lowest output is supposed to be 5 lumens, top is supposed to be 700. Let's take a look here and see what we are actually getting. So I'm going to turn it on. We're on low. I'm measuring 3 lumens. So that's pretty good, actually. I want the lowest possible here. 5 would have been too high for me. I'd like 1 or sublumen even. Okay, so now mode 2, we're getting 22, which is a little under the 30 that they quote. Then we got 124, which they quote 150, and then the turbo. All right, 620 at startup. That's not bad if they're quoting 700 lumens. I'm looking at the time meter here. Let's see what ANSI is. We'll go to 30 seconds. It's not dropping very fast. That's pretty amazing, actually, to be in the still 500s, like high 500s. Okay, 10 seconds to ANSI. And it looks like we're going to get about 550 ANSI. Not bad for a tiny, tiny light. Yeah, there you go, 560 ANSI. So that's pretty darn amazing for such a small, little, tiny light.
Let's do a head-to-head tint comparison. Let's start with our Through Night T1S, which is quite green. Now we'll have the Fall Mauve EDC, which has a slightly rosy hue to it, but is also much cooler. And lastly, we'll have the CyanSky M3, which is more neutral and a little bit warmer. Of the 3 of them, I find the CyanSky M3 to have the nicest tint.
All right, we mentioned that the beam is kind of neutral, but it also varies from low to high, meaning that it starts out kind of green and then goes under BBL, so it gets a little rosy. So let's start at the lowest mode and take a look. At the lowest mode, it's about 50 points over Delta UV, which is on the green side. Not super objectionable, but you'd notice it. It's kind of like what a Samsung LH351D would be like. Let's go up a step, and it should lower and get a little closer to BBL. There you go. It's now 25. That's not bad. Remember that the sun itself is 8 above. Now let's go to high, and it should go under BBL now. Yep, now it's 14 under, and then on turbo, there you go, it's 88 under. Let's take a look at its CRI. This is not a high CRI light. You can see the R9 value isn't the worst I've seen, though. At least it's positive. Some of these lights, it's actually, negative 40, negative 20. And the other values are pretty decent. So for a lower CRI light, not bad. All right, let's do some beam shots inside the house. We start with the through night. You can see how throwy and kind of just concentrated the beam is. Let me mode up here. And you can see that even when it's really bright and the spill gets brighter, there's this intense hot spot in the middle. Now, if we take a look at the Fall Mauve, the Fall Mauve is much more floody. Let me kind of get it a little brighter here. And you can see that it's pretty even. It's pretty even across the boards. It's kind of a big, large circle of light, okay? But now let's take a look at the M3, which is really kind of a hybrid of the two. You can see it's got a definite hot spot, but then there is more even of a pattern than the through night had. This is my favorite. of the three. And the reason why is because I just kind of like flashlights with hotspots. I find the utility of it. When I use a mule and everything's completely even, that might be nice for photography, but for actual work or actually walking around, they just lack candela and they just don't put the light where I want it. They kind of spread all over. So between the three types of patterns, ultra kind of concentrated or floody, I'm going to go this middle ground. This is the one I like. So let's take a look at these ultralight EDCs. We're going to start with a D4V2 as a baseline. And let me go ahead and bump it up to turbo. And you can see that the D4V2 as an EDC light is pretty floody, very throwy still, and that's because it's got the SST20s in here. These are the 4K versions. But, you know, this isn't necessarily a fair comparison when you compare it against these little tiny guys. I mean, look how much bigger it is, especially compared to the M3. The Through Night T1S is a really tiny light, but the CyanSky M3 is very much smaller. So let's see how these stack up. The Through Night T1S is kind of a throwy light. It's got a large tier in the front, and it kind of gives you a spot. It throws really far, but it is very kind of concentrated. The M3, on the other hand, is much floodier. You can see that it's floodier, but it still penetrates. This is a great light if you want a little tiny EDC that fits in your pocket and illuminates everything for a wide swath. The Volumov EDC is smaller than the CyanSky M3, but a large part of that is due to the fact that it uses a kind of a non-standard battery. This is kind of a half-length 14500. So it's kind of a ding against it that you won't be able to find this battery easily. But the CyanSky M3 is based on the very industry standard 16340. Let's see how they fare against each other. So we're going to go straight to turbo in both cases. So here is the Volumov EDC, and then here is the CyanSky M3. I find that the CyanSky M3 is brighter and throws a little farther. This thing really punches for its size. All right, so my final thoughts on this little bad boy. Well, it's very small and it's super lightweight due to the titanium metal while being extra rugged. I mean, I just don't see lights this small that have glass, have full metal hard enclosures like this. Sometimes they're aluminum, but sometimes they're actually plastic for, let's say, the button, for the bezel, things like that. So I think that this is a really well-made, tiny little EDC light with a ton of output and pleasing tint. So I really, there's not much more I can ask for on a light like this. The only thing that I kind of maybe wish that there was is a magnet in the tail cap. There is no magnet in the tail cap on this guy, but I understand the design reason to leave it out because it might have added a few more millimeters and they were going for ultra tiny. And also don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let's grow this channel a little bit. I want to try and get some more high-end brands in here. And as always, I will see you in the next video.